It is indeed an honor to come and share some of what our research is all about. And some of the questions that were raised earlier may be touching on what I'm going to be presenting. And particularly that my talk might be expanding on Dr. Sibanda's presentation as she focused on the internal. And mine, it does focus on the internal, but it also mainly focusing on those that left the country into exile, receiving military training, and that's where our focus is going to be. My talk, it's subdivided into these 5 topics. I'm not going to do justice to each of them because each one of those, they are, extensive on their own. I'm going to look at the contextualization of women participation in the armed struggle, the tough choices and the hard decisions they had to make, which was the reason for them to join the armed struggle. Their experiences all the way from the time that they leave the country to the time when they return back home, which will also be transferred to homecoming. What did they experience when they are back home? And lastly, the legacies, which is what the youth have been asking questions this morning about. The legacy. And that is what you have to build on. They left a torch. It should not die in your hands. It's up to you what to do with it. You are attending this lecture this afternoon in order for you to take something and make it a point that it does not die. We gather today to reflect on a chapter of our history that is often overshadowed, but vital to our understanding of liberation, which is the role of the young women in the struggle for freedom in our country. The focus is on young women because the majority of those that left were in their teen years. They left school to go and join the liberation armies in exile. To them, they left with the song, "Give me my AK, Auletu Mshinwam," so that they can come and confront what was killing their classmates, their schoolmates, to return fire with fire. There were women that were also in exile, who were out of their teen years, who went with their husbands. There were women that left, having been sent by their unions to go and receive training to come and build the underground structures. And then you would have women that remained behind. And the struggle for liberation was colorblind. We have to emphasize that. There were people that the apartheid system intended them to be the beneficiaries. But because of Ubuntu, they could see that injustice is injustice. Whether you do it on a wrong or rather a black skin or a white skin, injustice remains injustice. And they left to join this movement. Women's role dates back to the wars of resistance to colonization since 1779. Across Southern Africa and beyond, liberation movements relied not only on men, but also on the bravery, resilience, and dedication of young women who risked their lives and sacrificed the best years of their lives for the vision of a free nation. These were the women who, in the face of danger, fear, and uncertainty, chose courage over comfort, action over silence, and freedom over submission. They remind us that the liberation struggle was and is everyone's responsibility. As the saying goes, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes a duty. These women left for exile with scars, pain and bruises, dispossessed of land, denied access to land through the 1913 Land Act and the Bantu Administration or Authorities Act 1953, among others. Their mothers were denuded of dignity by being called kitchen girls and tea girls, forever displaced because of the forced removals, to be wanderers in the land of their ancestors. They left with the courage of Mama Mantatisi, Madinore, Sarah Bartman, Krotwa, the courage of the 20,000 women who marched onto the Union buildings on August 9, 1956. The courage of women in every corner of the country who faced the daily struggles to navigate through the system that placed them at the bottom or lowest rung of the racial and gender ladder, regarded by law as perpetual minors. Their resilience proved that courage is an inside job. They left with the hope of healing the land, but they knew to take out a thorn, you needed another thorn. It was this pain, the scars, the shame that provided two choices to them: submit or fight. It was their will to heal the land of their birth that made them to take the hard decisions and opted to fight. With these experiences, they stood by the hard decisions they made because they were convinced the yoke of oppression would be broken and to the benefit of those to come after them. South African history is written in blood, including the blood of unarmed women killed fighting for injustice, protection of their children, and fight to put a bread on their table. By the 1970s, South Africa was not a safe place because of the unfettered powers of the police, whose duty outside of the white areas was not for crime prevention, but to enforce the plethora of discriminatory laws through excessive use of force, early morning raids, arbitrary detention, torture, disappearances, and murder, which they claimed was due to a hunger strike or concealed through various other means. The state violence, which reached its highest proportions in the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, was responsible for breeding anger in the younger generations who grew up in the state-perpetuated violence with impunity. They were condemned at birth by the Population Registration Act, denied quality education to develop humanity by the Bantu Education Act, and the 1975 forced language policy to introduce Afrikaans as the medium of instruction in black schools. They fled the country with full knowledge that their actions contravened the Terrorism Act, which would be reinforced by the Internal Security Act in 1982. Despite the educational opportunities that were available to them and were presented to them in exile, they continued to make tough choices and hard decisions by opting to join the military because their individual and collective desire to free the country of the scourge that the country and the majority of the people had endured for centuries. Because to them, liberation could not be postponed any longer. The system that pushed them out of the country united humanity, even those that apartheid was intended to be beneficiaries. They revolted and became combatants. For that, they joined liberation armies of Umkhonto weSizwe, APLA, and Azanla. And from the hostile bushes in foreign lands, as consolation and reminder of their commitment, they sang, "Soba Shia abazali ekhaya, saphuma sangena angamanye amazwe, lapho ngingazi ukhona ubaba lomama, ngilande inkululeko." This was so because, like I said, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. The challenges and hardships started when they had to flee the country. The journey was not smooth, as they had to navigate and avoid the ring of steel that stood ready to capture them. Crossing the border was as dangerous as danger itself, as some had to cross the overflowing Mohokare River, which is Caledon, between South Africa and Lesotho, when they crossed into Lesotho. And you can think of any other border that these young women had to cross. Young women then, but today they are not young women. Safety and survival in the neighboring countries wasn't guaranteed either, as the Flag Plus unit reigned and roamed freely in Lesotho and Swaziland, abducting and killing the activists and innocent nationals of those countries that were under assault. In the camps, they learned the tough and uncompromising military routine and culture. They were exposed to harsh camp living conditions, sharing the space with the wildlife. When you listen to their stories, they will tell you that there will be a time that they wake up in the morning and they find that they are sleeping with a snake. And they had to sleep or to pretend to be sleeping, not to move in their bed until 1 o'clock midday, when the snake would have made its mind that, okay, it's time for me to leave. That's when they would leave, because any movement would invite a deadly strike from the snake. That was what they shared with the wild. These conditions continue to follow them in the forward areas where they will be deployed, where they faced diseases, living under constant fear of the South African Air Force and the Special Forces raids, leaving them with psychological stress from witnessing violence and ambushes from UNITA, loss of comrades, and experiencing abuse in certain instances. Being female combatant did not make them immune from the persisting patriarchal attitudes where they had to work twice as hard to prove their worth as soldiers of the liberation and to fit in the men's environment. The extended separation from home naturally resulted in homesickness. For a teenager, grow without parental guidance and family support, that meant that they were the disadvantaged, thus robbed of their youth experiences. Falling pregnant meant they were removed from the military camps and confined to Morogoro, where their status as soldiers was temporarily suspended until the Kabwe Conference of 1985, where women raised their concerns to say we left home to become soldiers. We cannot be denied this natural thing that occurs to us, that we can fall pregnant. Is it a sin to fall pregnant? Because once you fall pregnant, in MK in particular, you are no longer a soldier. The 1985 Morogoro Conference brought them back, and some of them were infiltrated back into the country. These conditions left them with emotional and psychological trauma of comrades dying and buried in foreign lands, and sometimes they were buried in already used graves, buried in top of others, making it possible that in future, should there be repatriation, it was going to be difficult because there will be 2 remains or even 3 in that grave. This tormented them to think that the same could happen to them should they die in exile. Overstay in exile also had its fair share in their frustrations and emotional being. The movement's inability to deploy them back into the country, in consideration of the situation in the country and the high number of casualties to those that were deployed, caused a strain to them that it defeated the purpose for them to leave the country in the first place. But it also meant prolonged stay away from their families. They are being separated from their families, and some of them left the country leaving 3-month-old children in certain instances because they were the wanted, and the parents would say, "You are not safe, go away, I'll take care of the child." Despite these challenges, they demonstrated remarkable resilience, creating networks of support and ensuring continuity of the struggle. With negotiations, they came back home. Returning home was possibly the hardest for most of them. Instead of bringing joy of returning with to be rejoined with their families and friends, they returned home not with a triumphant march to Pretoria, emulating their popular Toy Toy song, Siaya Epitoli. But when they returned home, some came to find their homes desolate. They came home being granted immunity by the government they were fighting against. Immunity from prosecution because they were regarded as terrorists. Some found their families having been relocated, some with no place to sleep in the house. Life in exile made them to survive as a unit where they cared for each other. Once they returned home, unfortunately and sadly, it was everybody for herself and God for us all, as the English saying goes. They left, some of them, grade 7, grade 8 of today, grade 9 of today. Therefore, they had no formal educational qualifications. They did not pursue educational qualifications in exile. Thus, they returned home with the same grade that they left. Coming home, they knew military for all these years that they were in exile. They wanted to join the military, but they were told there was no place around the fire. You do not qualify because you have got standard 4. We need someone who has got metric. Whose fault was it? That was the reintegration process. It spit them out. Once they are out, they are regarded as terrorists, unqualified terrorists that were now forced to compete for jobs with the recently qualified people in a sea of unemployment. From 1990, we had sanctions back then. The country was still reeling from that, and therefore they could not get employment because they had this tag. Where are you from? You are in exile. Therefore, you are a terrorist. To try to address their plight, they tried a collaborative approach by forming military veterans associations. Finally, in 2011, their voice seemed to be heard when the government passed the Military Veterans Act and established the Department of Military Veterans. Just when they thought their plight was heard, it remained a dream, because 14 years after the passing of the Military Veterans Act, there are still those veterans that haven't received any benefit from it. People that did not fight, they are the ones that are enjoying the benefits. And therefore, where it's recognition for them, where it's dignity for them, they went out to try to salvage the little dignity that they had. But today, they sit here without that. The tough choices and difficult decisions were the highest form of patriotism a nation can ever get from its daughters. Their participation led to a change in the tapestry on the political landscape and social history of South Africa. Gains of their toil and sweat are there to be seen. Gender recognition. South Africa is now a pace setter when it comes to issues of gender, and various other gender policies passed to correct the past wrongs. Women's participation in the liberation war reshaped societal expectations of gender roles and gave new meaning to a citizen woman. The struggle was for a place under the sun. The struggle was for survival. Their struggle was for equality. Their struggle was for justice. This is the torch they have left, and not to die in someone's hands. There is a growing need for oral histories to capture their stories, memorialization of their courage and resilience, and there is a need for intergenerational dialogue to keep their stories and contribution alive into the future. But a begging question arises: has the life of an ordinary South African woman changed in 2025? How different is the life of an ordinary South African woman from the tough choices and the hard decisions the young women of 1963, 1976, 1984 were forced to take. In my view, it is a luta continua. As I conclude, young female students, tough choices they faced, tough decisions they had to make. They became combatants when they should have been at school. Some barely out of their teens. They took the responsibility that was way out of their pay grade, but they rose up to the challenge to take up only that which heroes do. As Steve Biko said, it is better to die for an idea that will live than to live for an idea that will die. The yoke that they wanted to break, which at the time seemed to be as solid as a rock, was finally broken. The world witnessed the birth of a new country. And out of the ashes of decades of torture and degradation, like a phoenix, South Africa rose. The world listened in 1994 and watched what will forever echo in their minds. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. Thank you.